Well, well, well. Well, while everybody else in the country was working last week, apart from Victorians who took Monday and Tuesday off because of a gambling problem, our Prime Minister went touring Queensland in what has, amusingly, to someone, presumably, been called the ScoMo Express. And despite it being called an express, it's...
stopping by Rockhampton, Bundaberg, Gladstone and Mackay, and he's moving very quickly, saying he's trying to meet as many people on the ground as possible.
In which case, he should have gone down to Victoria for the Melbourne Cup. Anyway, what was the message the Prime Minister was hoping to convey to those up north? Well, I think it was so he could show that, unlike Malcolm Turnbull, Scott Morrison is better able to connect with the values of grassroots Liberal supporters. And I think we have footage of that grassroots connection. But it wasn't just about the optics. The Prime Minister was very clear about the purpose of the visit.
We've been hearing what Queenslanders are saying, and that's why we're doing. And here today, we're here to do.
Or to put it another way...
I'm always listening. I'm always looking to hear.
And in case there was any doubt...
This is me doing what I do, and I'm out, I'm listening, I'm hearing, and I'm doing.
Yes, he's out doing what he does doing. And one of the things Mr Morrison has been doing beautifully, in my opinion, is hearing while listening to farmers' requests to ease the visa restrictions on backpackers. As Mr Morrison quite rightly said...
We can't ignore the big picture. Backpackers bring money in for Australia.
Yes, clearly modelling himself on Alexander Downer. Another request that Scott heard was to fund more transport infrastructure on the Gold Coast. As the PM said...
This is the largest single investment of a Commonwealth government, a light rail project anywhere in the country.
Yes, no one's ever invested in light rail before. Trail being rail that you pray wins you votes. Not in the pejorative sense of the word ordinary, but, you know, a guy who loves having a drink with the locals. And I think we have a clip here. While there are some wowsers out there who might think it's undignified for a Prime Minister to scoll a beer and then stick the empty cup on his head, I think it's great that we've got a PM who can hold his liquor. And I think we have footage of the PM here. Holding... Oh, no. Still, the fact that Scott can pull this sort of thing off speaks volumes for him, those volumes being about 285 mils. On any other Liberal Prime Minister, a beer cup upside down on their head would look just sad and undignified. Or gauche and boorish, or a desperate attempt to win over voters. Because according to the latest polls, things aren't going too well. Well, I've got some good news. It's already happened. Mark Latham, formerly leader of the Labor Party, has joined Pauline Hanson, formerly pre-selected for the Liberal Party, to fight for civilisational values. And that's great, because when you think of being civil, you can't help but think of these two.
You put out there that I said the C word to you. I called you a C word. That is an absolute lie.
It is absolutely true.
I called you a little prick.
Negro, negro, negro.
Mark are enjoying the honeymoon stage of their political marriage, with both parties showing their best sides, with Pauline just last week accusing the Aboriginal industry of milking land rights claims for all they're worth, and Mark not turning up at all to the joint Studio 10 interview they were supposed to be at, although Mark leaving that chair empty was probably in his best interest, given what happened last time a camera caught him trying to sit in one. But I am looking forward to seeing what results from both of them putting their heads together, other than a sharp cracking sound. Pauline gave us just a hint of what we could expect.
We need policies that are driven with ideas that are driven by good policies.
I cut out the middleman. Just get rid of the ideas and just have good policies driven by good policies. Now, I've referred earlier in the show to our PM drinking beer, and I don't want to give the impression that his Queensland trip was some sort of extended pub crawl. On the contrary, it was about so much more than just that, I assure you. What I really appreciated about the trip was Scott ditching that TV cliche of having yes men alongside him nodding along robotically with everything he says. Instead, opting for the far more realistic image of somebody indicating that he's fucking insane. Works better, I think. So it wasn't just about drinking beer, it was about a variety of things, particularly the variety of things he was drinking the beer from, be they cans or pots or pints. At the end of the day, he's shown Queenslanders and the rest of us that he's the traditional, tireless, baseball cap-wearing Liberal Party Polly. He's one of us. Unlike Labor, as he pointed out, Mr and Mrs Heartland Australia are just far too common for those hoity-toity toffs.
They're about sipping almond lattes with green left groups in inner-city suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne.
And stone the crows, he's right. Ever since Bob Hawke held those punsy sommelier lessons at the ACTU back in the early 70s, the Labor Party has been totally up itself. What I did take offence at, though, was when Scott said,
I think the ABC should stop coming up to press conferences and repeating the lines of the Labor Party every time I step up to the microphone.
I mean, that's a bit rich, being accused of repeating lines by Mr...
On the Central Coast, 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 Central Coast, Central Coast, Central Coast, Central Coast.
Anyway, we don't repeat Labor Party's lines. We come up with them and then they repeat them. The other problem some people had with the Queensland trip was the bus. Apart from the fact that Scott appears to have tagged it himself, a lot of journalists seem to be troubled by the fact that he wasn't on it that much and flew to places instead, leading to this interesting ontological question.
And your point is what?
I'm just interested in the point of the bus if you're not on it.
I am on it. I just got off it.
Can the PM be both on the bus and off it at the same time? Lecturer in Pedantics at Box Hill TAFE, Professor Ian Albspider.
Positively, Professor Shaun. Now, are you familiar with Schrodinger's cat?
Only by reputation.
Allow me to introduce you.
All right. So the cat is in the box.
And a piece of highly radioactive material. Now, the quantum supposition is that the cat inside the box is both simultaneously alive and dead.
All right. Well, it certainly seems to be alive.
In theory. The true state of the cat can only be determined with certainty by opening the lid and looking in. The same can be said of Scott Morrison.
Well, we know Scott's alive, though, because we have footage of him physically moving off the plane he was on and onto the bus he wasn't. The question is, can he be on both? Or more specifically, as Scott claims, can proof that he's on the bus be furnished by the fact that he's just gotten off it?
Like Schrodinger's cat, the proof of the pudding is to look inside the bus.
Shall we?
Allow me to restrain it for you.
Thank you very much. Ah. A pudding.
Exactly.
All right. And Schrodinger's cat?
Well, here's one I prepared earlier.
But regardless of whether he flew ahead of the bus he was on or travelled by road to the airport to greet himself getting off the plane, Scott was seated for most of the journey. I think that's what's important here. And he met people and he connected with them, warning them about the dangers of voting for minor parties.
The problem is, you never know what you're going to get. They turn up and they tell you what you want to hear, but when they get there, it's not even the same people.
And you have to admit that the guy who replaced Tony Abbott knows what he's talking about. Plus, he announced there will be infrastructure improvements along the Great Ocean Road.
Including better tourist facilities at the 12 Apostles.
So yet more religious pork barrelling. And finally, the PM took some time out from holding press conferences to speak to the media this week, and when asked about Mark Latham's return to politics, said...
Mark Latham it's a bit like The Bachelor. He's been handing out roses to the Labor Party, to the Liberal Democrats, and now he's handing out one to One Nation. Who knows who he'll go home with?
Good one. Although, if anything, a TV show where women gradually leave disappointed is really more like the Liberal Party. Goodbye.